And I must say that in order for a tech startup leader to be successful,
Mm,
they need first to have cultural intelligence as an asset in
yeah,
their, or a tool in their how do you say
tools
that,
in your
tool
toolbox.
set, yeah,
Yeah.
toolbox, yeah. And with the personal mastery, what we do there is we go deep into your understanding of your cultural biases. And because we have a framework, the CQ
Mm,
framework, where we do the CQ assessment profile,
mm,
then you have an understanding of your own biases, okay, as a leader. And then when we go and develop a 360 feedback where
mm,
your direct reportees, or it depends how many people you want
yeah,
to do this, and it's anonymous, of course, then you can better see, okay, how people perceive you versus how you perceive yourself. And
yeah.
then from there, we can help to strategize and build an action plan in order to have a good team leadership, right? And
Mm-hmm,
when we speak about tech startup, right, technology, right,
mm-hmm,
I can imagine that most of the team members you would be hiring as a tech startup leader is
mm-hmm,
there will be a spread wide across the world, right? Because
yeah.
I think it's a norm now, right?
Mm,
Everyone is not working on the same office, same location to be successful, because to be global, you
yeah.
have to be also be willing to expand your borders, right? So when you take this venture into tech leadership, founding a company,
Mm-hmm,
um, CQ will make you even more successful from the beginning,
yeah,
because now you're able to understand culturally where are your team members come from,
yeah,
right? From communication style, from decision making style, and all the behaviors that will manifest.
yeah.
And that will really, let's say, minimize, right, the inefficiencies. I wouldn't say completely resolve, because there
No,
are other key areas from a leadership standpoint, right?
yeah.
So it will minimize the inefficiencies and make your tech startup company be more success from the beginning.
Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk Jan Hupkes, and on this podcast, I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases, and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk Jan Hupkes, and in this podcast, I interview the women who are changing the narrative about diversity in tech. Now, if you work with a startup or an international company, you probably know that you have to work with people from various backgrounds and maybe also in various locations. Think of developers in Ukraine, developers or data analysts in India, but also remote work has come into the forefront with COVID. So the question becomes, how do you manage those teams effectively? And this is where cultural intelligence comes in. Cultural intelligence is, of course, important in an international context, but also comes into play when you work with expats in a local context. And therefore, I figured it was time to explore this topic a bit further. And we'll do that with Dr. Ma Cherie Cortez. She was born in the Philippines and worked in many international teams in multinational companies in the UK, in France, in Belgium, and in the Netherlands. And based on her experience, she wrote a book called Master Cultural Intelligence in 7 Steps. So, in this episode, we'll discuss what cultural intelligence or CQ is, why it's important, and how you can manage international teams, often remote, effectively. So, Let's start mastering cultural intelligence and welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Dr. Ma Cherie Cortez. So, welcome, Ma Cherie. Good to have you. Question I always ask at the start is how you got to your current job or current position.
Yes, thank you, Dirk-Jan. First of all, thank you for having me in your platform. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a very interesting and timely topic that you are raising this up
Yeah.
about women disrupting technology in technology. And in particular, in technology aspect of the industry, seldom you see women in the leadership roles. So I sincerely hope that this platform is gaining momentum for women who are aspiring to be leaders in the tech industry. So very great initiative, and thank you for having me. And yeah, thank you for the question. I realized that looking back at my career, I've always had the intention of working for international companies.
Mm-hmm.
This may sound a little bit a long story, but just to go back a little bit of my story in a short form. Um, when I worked as a sales clerk in the Philippines, that was my first job. It was never an IT or tech company, but it was an international company where I was a sales clerk for a Parisian brand called Estée Dupont Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I met a very nice client of ours who's an Australian. And back in the 90s, Philippines was still booming, So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of um, high tower buildings that are being set up. And this owner of this company invited me to join his company, which is called Veldon, an Australian company. And from there, I was a telephone operator, still not an
Okay.
IT.
Yeah.
And in that building, in the same office, across is Microsoft Philippines. And I became friends with the people who are working there.
Mm-hmm.
And during breaks, lunch breaks, coffee break, we would catch up. And they told me about their plans on expanding in the Philippines, Microsoft in the
Mm-hmm.
90s. And
Yeah.
Microsoft back then it was the greatest
Yeah, it
company,
was one
right?
of the companies to work for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it was the ideal, company to
Yeah.
work for. And they told me that they have an opening for a customer contact center, which is now, call center basically, or
Mm-hmm.
BPO. And I said, yeah, I would like to apply, please. Even though I didn't know any technical things about
Yeah.
Microsoft, I just went for it. And the Singaporean manager hired me. And that was the beginning of my IT exposure. So, what I did was in the evening, I took another course, which is IT. Information technology management, so I can just have some understanding and have a
Mm-hmm.
deeper understanding of what IT means, because I work
Yeah.
for Microsoft itself.
Yeah.
And that investment paid so much so that it brought me to where I am
Mm-hmm.
in my current position. So with Microsoft, I was very successful in supporting the salespeople, because back then the major focus of Microsoft was the anti-piracy. And in the
Yeah.
Philippines, there's a lot of pirated copies of CDs, and you can just install everything. And
Yeah.
because the sales managed to get a lot of commissions because of the support I did for him
Yeah.
by calling down the campaign,
Yeah.
when he moved to SAP, which is a German company, and
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what SAP was. So he
Mm-hmm.
called me up and said, hey, since we had a good tandem in Microsoft, why
Yeah.
don't you support me here in SAP? I said, well, I'm already in Microsoft.
Yeah.
That's like a big name. And then he made me realize that there's more.
Yeah.
So SAP is more ERP, more corporate,
Mm-hmm.
enterprise-wide setup, whereas Microsoft is more on the end user side, right?
Mhm.
So I went for an interview and I got hired, and I was a sales assistant of the sales team. So I became a user of SAP, which is booking contracts, creating purchase orders,
Yeah.
for my managers and sales team. And then I got really curious about this SAP. So what happened was every weekend I would go to the office, because back then there are no laptops. There's
No.
only massive desktops that you can have. So I would put in those CDs just to have an understanding what is SAP, what are these modules that I'm
Mm.
using. And then finally that paid off. That investment of, putting time, energy, and focus, because when SAP Philippines expanded its global support, I got to apply and I
Mhm.
got in as a customer contact consultant of
Uh-huh.
SAP Global Support. And for me, that gave me also a wider understanding of what typical the problems of the clients are, and what are the opportunities as well
Mhm.
that they
Yeah.
are not harnessing. So from there, I was very successful working with the team. SAP Global Support is not always an easy job, because especially when the systems are down, and you can't do anything because you're relying on technical people. And the best that I could do is to make sure that the ticket is really well monitored, and
Mm.
every progress I call the customer and say, hey, we receive a progress, can you please try and do this, etc. And the
Mm.
support comes from Germany. SAP is global, right? Especially
Yeah.
if it's really highly technical, the SAP technical people from Germany in Heidelberg would respond, right?
Yeah.
So then I said maybe I could do more for clients. And then next to SAP Office is actually Magnus, which is a Dutch company, an
Mhm.
implementation partner of SAP.
Yeah.
And I knocked on the door and I said, well, I wanted to understand what's your plans for
Mm.
your Philippines operations. And then
Mm.
they told me, well, we wanted to establish also an SAP support for our implementation customers, because
Mm.
we're the best person to support their project, because
Mm.
we implemented it them ourselves. And I
Yeah.
said, well, I've done support for SAP and Microsoft. Maybe I could help you with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, basically I created the role for me, and I was hired as the SAP support manager, and I had to establish everything from the branding, the name of the company, because it's a separate legal entity. And I
Mhm.
have to hire SAP consultants from zero consultant. I think we managed to hire 30 people in a span of 3 to 6 months. And that's a very good progress milestone, because in the Philippines, it's always difficult to find SAP consultants back then
Mhm.
in the 90s. So they're very rare. You have to be ready to pay really good money, really good salary, because of the demand. So yeah, and then afterwards, my team member was everything was going well. I'm having success, from role, from
Mm.
clients, from money. Although of course it's not all about money, but that's part of the
Yeah.
success, right? Tangible success.
Yeah.
And then one of my team leaders, a very very good friend of mine, was moving out, and I said, well, why are you moving? We are in the best company. And then
Mm.
she said, well, there's a UK company that's going to establish an SAP global support
Mm.
here in the Philippines. And I said, what is this company? And this company is called Logica. And I
Mhm.
said, well, can you introduce me to the CEO? I want to have a coffee chat, and
Mm.
see what their plans are. So I did that. And then obviously, again, I created the role for me. And then the CEO, global CEO from the UK, was coming to Manila to oversee the grand opening of the
Yeah.
office. And yeah, I was basically subjected to a 2 hour interview where I didn't know that it was actually a real
job
customer
interview.
scenario. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was testing me both technically and the strategy
Uh-huh.
in terms of how my plan of attack would be. And then little did I know that was actually for a Belgium client.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 months later, I found myself in Leuven in Belgium
Yeah.
to manage the global outsourcing contract for Logica for InBev, AB InBev, which
Yeah.
is now also InBev Budweiser because of the
Yeah.
merger and acquisition. And it's famous for its Stella Artois beer,
Yeah.
and now with Budweiser brand as
Also for the
well.
boat.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of my, let's say, multicultural exposure and working for international companies. Because from there, I moved on to living in Paris, and then
Mm.
living in the Netherlands for Philips project, and then living in the UK in London for Lloyd's Mobile Banking Group, which is a huge
Yeah.
digital transformation. So I would suppose that, looking back, I think my ambition of since I was a child, I wanted to go abroad. I wanted to work for international companies. And now looking back at my career
Yeah.
progress, I just realized, like, wow, I realized this dream actually
Yeah.
by having all these experiences.
Yeah. And that's great. Can I double click on a couple of things?
Yeah.
Because you now have a quite extensive background in IT, but
Mm-hmm.
you didn't, I think you originally have a degree in nutrition
Mm.
and
Yeah.
diets,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Dietetics. Yeah.
Uh, was there anything in your education that sort of helped you go into IT?
Mm-hmm.
Or was that just plain, yeah, luck? Or things that just have serendipity, I think is the
Mm-hmm.
better
Mm-hmm.
term for that.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for the great question, actually. I guess it's a little bit of both of everything.
Mm,
It's a luck. It's also the focus on my mindset. Like I want to achieve this dream since childhood. But of course, the universe plays out in synchronicity, as you
yeah,
mentioned. Now, a little side note why I took nutrition and dietetics.
yeah.
Um, I grew up from a poor family,
Mm-hmm,
and I was gifted with, let's say, good brain cells.
mm-hmm,
And I used that to really excel in education. And in the Philippines, I managed to, let's say, be a top five, top 10 in the school.
mm-hmm.
And as a reward, we were given the chance to send off to scholarship programs to the largest and
Uh,
well-known, famous and expensive universities in Manila, in the
yeah.
Philippines. And I was super, super blessed and lucky
Uh,
because I managed to get in at the St. Scholastica's College Manila, where they paid for everything. I was given an allowance. And to be frank, I wouldn't be able to achieve any education if not for that scholarship because
yeah,
we could barely eat 3 times a day. How
yeah.
else can my parents, send me to school?
Mm-hmm,
Right, let alone pay for college tuitions. And my father is only an ice cream vendor. We call it dirty ice cream because
mm,
it's made at home, and then he pushes the cart from every town, and then maybe make, I don't know, back then maybe 10 pesos, which is like 50 cents euros these
mm.
days. So
Per day
and
or per week or
no, per day. It's like 50 cents euros, or not. Probably now it's 50 cents, but before it's probably 5 cents
yeah,
euros. And we could just, it's difficult to meet the basic requirements at back home. So,
yeah.
going back, when I had the chance to go with scholarship,
Mm-hmm,
My intention was really to go abroad. So, what was the course or the degree that I should be taking on so that it gives me a higher probability to go abroad?
Mm-hmm.
And back then in the 90s, my uncle lives in Canada, and
Mm-hmm.
he still does.
Yeah.
But in the 90s, the focus of Canada immigration was on primarily on health and
Yeah.
nutrition and dietetics, because they have a scoring based system, had
Mm-hmm.
the highest score. And IT was
Ah,
not even, well
that
known
was not a
because I
thing.
exactly we still don't have internet. And I remember I have to submit everything with a paper, physical
Yeah.
paper, to the embassy because
Yeah.
there's no internet to upload all these things.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I think this will give me is the right approach to pursue my dream, which is to go abroad and work for international companies.
Ah, okay.
And it's also a pre-medical course, a
Mm.
degree, because I wanted to be a doctor since I was a child. And so this is the course I took,
Mm-hmm.
but later on would yield to a different career experience, which is IT.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, the luck was on my side when I was working as a telephone operator for an Australian company,
Yeah.
and then next to our office was Microsoft Philippines,
Yeah.
and that was a really good opening for me in terms of IT. And then I studied information services management, technology management in the evening to have that second degree for me to
Mm-hmm.
have more background of the IT. So I think in summary, when you know what you want to achieve and you're out there to get it, you don't look at your what's lacking. You don't
Yeah.
look at what's missing. You just go
Yeah.
for it, and then from there, you continue to develop and just be courageous to achieve that dream. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool and also really inspiring, I think,
Hmm.
because you just took what you played, as the Americans would say, you played the card that was dealt to you, the
Yeah.
hand of cards that was dealt to you, and you
Yeah.
played it to the max, if
Yeah.
I understand it correctly. Okay, so the
Absolutely.
the second thing I want to double click on is at some point you're interviewed by the CEO of Logica,
Hmm.
and then you find yourself in Belgium. How did you prepare to go to Belgium? Were there specific things you did, or was it just packing your bags and thinking, "Hey, I'm going to have this wonderful, high-paying and hard-working job in a company that I love to work for"?
Hmm.
How did you prepare?
Yeah, thank you. I think you said it, the latter part, actually. When I was offered this job to go to Belgium,
Mm,
it was like, wow, there's no second thinking about it. I
yeah,
just immediately signed the contract, packed a one luggage of more corporate clothes.
yeah.
Um, Even my parents, they didn't know actually that I was
Oh,
leaving. And I guess I just went for it. I took the quantum, let's say, leap and jumped
yeah,
into this opportunity because yeah, this is the break that I have been working on. This is the dream that I have been dreaming of, to work abroad and to serve in an international company, right?
yeah,
And to be honest, if I had known about CQ or cultural intelligence back then, I would say I would have been much, much, much prepared.
mm-hmm,
Not because I was not successful with the client.
mm,
I was very, very successful, and I'm thankful for InBev because that gave me the publicity of
mm-hmm,
being very good in what I do with the client and servicing the SAP global transformation, because I was, let's say, I became famous with the likes of Accentures and Tata Consulting, another consulting firm which we are competing with or in
yeah,
partners with. Um, and I remember a scenario. In the Philippines, we are known to have a warm personality,
Yeah,
and my style is always, touching the shoulder or
yeah,
touching, the arm,
yeah,
and I'm very touchy.
yeah,
And when I did this with my colleagues within
yeah.
Logica, who are mostly British and
Bit stiff upper
European.
lip,
Exactly, yeah. So they took it
a bit more formal.
differently.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So they thought I was initiating something, and
yeah,
and I was very informal to them, but in fact I was just, initiating more personal connection.
yeah,
You know, but on the other hand, that approach worked with my Brazilian client, because back then the AB InBev was being reintegrated, and that's the reason why we were doing the SAP transformation, the
mm,
largest ERP transformation.
mm-hmm.
And most of the leaders that were sent as also expats in Leuven were Brazilians, the
Yeah,
CIO and the IT directors. So for me, it worked because from a cultural standpoint, we both have the warmth personality. We work on the basis of
yeah,
personal relationship, and then professional comes next. Whereas the European part, it's more professional first, and then
yeah,
you put distance on the personal aspect, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that was a big learning experience for me. Going looking back at the Belgian experience, and also every morning when I walk to the office, the
mm,
client's office, because my apartment was quite close,
mm,
and I would just smile and greet the people that are
yeah,
passing by next to me. Good morning or
mm,
goedemorgen, and they would be like looking at me like that and very surprised, like I'm very approaching, and smiling to them. And then yeah, I realized that this is not the culture here, whereas in Asia you can always smile to
mm,
everyone, and make it more like a light day, a happy
yeah.
day for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I had interesting that you mentioned this. Actually, I had this morning because I usually bike every morning to my coffee shop to get some decent coffee for me and
Mm-hmm.
my girlfriend. And I usually, if I meet people, I nod, like I greet. I acknowledge them from being there. When I come in, I say, "Hey, hello, how are you?" Not expecting anything back.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you're on the bike, people are like, "What's he doing?
Mm.
Why is he greeting me?" And I'm like, "Well, I think that's common courtesy, but
Mm-hmm.
still, it's become better." Second thing
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention, I was watching it, what this personal and business, especially in Holland, and I think also in Belgium, that's like really strict. There's like
Mm-hmm.
your work life, and
Mm.
there's your personal life, and those hardly ever interfere.
Mm.
What I remember from the expats that I worked with was that also because they were basically out there alone. So they did well. Sometimes they had a spouse or children, but in most cases they were there alone. So they sort of either want to connect with you also on a personal level, also to have company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something in the Netherlands that we really overlook by striving towards a really strict separation between work and life,
Mm.
uh, work and life. Let's say,
Yeah, yeah, you said it yourself. I think it's a very good point to make, that a lot of expats, in fact, this is a cultural shock.
yeah,
And one of the challenges of being an expat sent abroad, where you don't have any clue, or you're not culturally intelligent enough
mm,
to understand that this is the rather the custom or practices,
yeah,
and then you think for yourself, oh my God, why are they doing this to me? And then suddenly you become more looking towards yourself. Is there something wrong with you? When
yeah.
in fact,
I was
Yeah.
about to ask, do you take, I can imagine people taking this personally.
Yes, if you had asked me back then, I
Mm,
would not lie to you. I have taken everything more personal
mm,
attack because it feels like I'm only trying to do my best here. Why is it that they are not responding
yeah,
according to what I'm expecting,
yeah,
right? Because that's my culture, right?
yeah,
But since I was lacking intelligence on the cultural aspect of it,
mm-hmm,
um, then that was the expected results, right? Expected reaction from me.
mm-hmm,
But if I had the cultural intelligence with me, which I have now, and I continue to learn, it's not like when you are culturally intelligent, that's it, you
no,
continue
no,
to
no,
learn and develop, right?
yeah,
Now that I deal with Dutch people who are very, let's say, straight, blunt, right?
yeah,
If I didn't have the cultural intelligence as a skill, as an asset for me
mm,
right now, I would find myself all the time probably crying or not talking to colleagues
mm,
anymore because I tend to be emotional. I tend
yeah,
to take things like personally, and then I would say, "Oh, I'm not going to speak to this person anymore because he did this, he did that."
yeah,
But now, because I'm more culturally intelligent, then it's nothing personal. It's just
yeah,
the way the culture works
yeah.
in the Netherlands.
So you wrote two books or three books actually. I want to pick out two titles of that. One is How to 10x Your Expat Success, and
Hmm.
so we already talked a bit about what you wished you'd known before going abroad uh, to put yourself in Leuven. What's the one thing? Let's say there's someone listening who wants to be an expat.
Hmm.
What's the one thing you would tell them that they need to do before signing that contract?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question. There's a lot of tips, that
Yeah,
I gave away in the 10x Expat Success.
yeah,
And that was my intention actually, because I realized a lot of people, when they go abroad, they fail not because they lack technical skills,
mm-hmm,
because they are experts before they are sent, right?
yeah,
Otherwise, the company will not hire you,
yeah,
but they fail or they lack in some preparations.
yeah,
Of course, ideally, if they can first go through a cultural intelligence training or workshop or sessions, that
mm,
would be ideal, right?
mm,
Because then they can really understand and immerse themselves from the inside before they even land in the actual country
mm,
that they're moving into.
yeah,
And of course, now we have a lot of we have internet, we have a lot of sources, where you
yeah,
can get all the tips and tricks as well. But I think the very first uh, recommendation or tip
yeah,
for anyone moving abroad is to really research on the country's customs practices,
yeah,
that this country has, so that when you land in that country, you won't get any cultural shock,
mm,
and be prepared to, let's say, put away your own cultural norms and
yeah,
practices that may not probably work in the country that you're adopting. So it's good to have that awareness, uh, within yourself. In my book, actually, I talked about it in the CQ Mastery. It's
mm,
called personal mastery. That's a first step. The
yeah,
personal mastery, having a personal mastery of your own customs practices, cultural observations, observances, and then look at that from, okay, how does this match into the new country I'm moving into, so that I can be more successful as well.
sounds like a great point to transition to your latest book
Mm-hmm.
about the cultural intelligence mastery.
Mm.
Um, so let's start with the definition of cultural intelligence. What is it exactly? Because
Mm.
there's personal mastery involved, but it's a bit broader.
Yeah. Yeah. Cultural intelligence is, or CQ is defined as the ability, and it's also a capability to
Mm-hmm.
relate and work with other cultural aspects, right? When I say it's a capability, it means that you can actually develop this. Okay, it's not like you need to have an inborn or a genius to make sure that you
Yeah.
are culturally intelligent. This is different from IQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Intelligence quotient, which is more dealing with the mental or the logical aspect
Yeah.
of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and in CQ, because I'm a certified CQ facilitator and trainer, which I
Mm-hmm.
did for 6 to 8 months of training, intensive training, what we see and observe is that as you assess your own CQ knowledge or CQ profile, there's really nothing right or wrong with those assessment. It's
Mm-hmm.
really just comparing yourself versus the number of respondents that they have standardized the profile.
Yeah.
So when I look at myself, for example, if the most people are on the far right, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's say 85%, and I'm on the 25%,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that I am less CQ,
Yeah.
but it just means that where am I being compared based on that specific CQ profile,
Uh-huh.
so that I can be more aware in terms of my
Learning curve.
environment that I'm in, yeah, and
Yeah.
then be more culturally aligned
Yeah.
in that environment.
So your book is called Master Cultural Intelligence in 7 steps.
Yeah.
Um, you already described step number one, personal mastery. What are the complete 7 steps of that you need to take to become culturally intelligent?
Yeah, thanks for that. So we talked about the step one, personal mastery, which is actually the foundation of
Mm-hmm.
cultural intelligence. Without this, I think you can't really
No.
progress to step two. And step two is actually the intercultural competence. So this is where you develop cultural sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just backtrack on step one, actually, the personal mastery.
Yeah.
It's based on the foundation of working on the four competencies of CQ or cultural
Mm.
intelligence. So you have CQ drive, okay? You have the drive to learn, to initiate things, like to be more aware of it.
Yeah, you have
And
to
then
want it.
exactly. You're like, okay, why is Derek Jan so, if I may use you as an
Huh?
example, why is Derek Jan so blunt? Not like more warmth to me, etc. But that's more the drive for yourself to improve your CQ because
Uh-huh.
you don't understand what's the culture behind it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a CQ drive. And then as you acquire knowledge, right, then you have the CQ knowledge because now you
Mm.
understand that, yeah, it's normal for in the Netherlands that they tend to be straightforward. We call it blunt, right? Because they
Are
don't want
we?
to. I think in general, that's the perception.
Yeah.
I see some are not, but I see in general in my interactions that's how I have experienced it in my
Okay.
my career. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Because
you are different.
nah, the thing is also that many my experience is that many people here in the Netherlands want to be quote unquote politically correct. So
Mhm,
they actually
mhm,
hide quite a few things, and then sometimes they're like open about other things. Maybe we're blunt, but my own experience is that we're usually far from direct.
mhm,
If you
mhm,
talk to English and American people, they are far more direct than we are
mm,
in terms of communicating and in terms of what they want and need and expect of you. In Holland,
mhm,
that's still like, at least my experience is that people still try to sugarcoat it in some way, not to, no, 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 not to sugarcoat, that's the wrong word. Not
mhm,
to,
mhm,
we don't want to offend people.
mm, mhm.
And Sometimes
it's
that's sitting in the way. But anyway, that's a little sidestep.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good point you made mentions about the UK, versus Netherlands.
Mm,
Actually, it's the opposite. According to the CQ framework that
mm,
I've studied, the UK tends to be more indirect. So they have an indirect communication style,
mhm,
whereas the Dutch, German, okay, they tend to be more direct communication style.
yeah.
So that's on the CQ profile as well.
Oh,
Yeah. And
okay.
I'll be happy to share that more
Yeah.
with you. Yeah. So now we have the drive to learn
Mm,
CQ. And
mm,
now we have acquired the knowledge. So you can acquire knowledge through training, self
mhm,
assessment profile. And then now you have the CQ strategy. So, what are you going to do about that now that you have understood that this is the cultural aspect of being a Dutch person or living in the Netherlands? So, what
yeah.
are you going to do about yourself towards that? So, that's a strategy. And then the fourth is you put in the action because knowledge remains only knowledge, but it doesn't become a wisdom unless you really put it in practice, right?
Yeah. You have
It's
to
only
apply it.
a, yeah, yeah, knowledge is only a potential power, but
Mhm,
unless you really use it, then it only becomes a really transforms its power when you put that in experience,
mhm,
in real living it. So yeah, so that's on the personal mastery. Now we go to the intercultural competence, which is the developing the cultural sensitivity,
yeah.
right? And then the third is the relational synergy, uh,
Mhm,
where you build bridges across cultures, right?
yeah.
So you further expand on focusing how to leverage your cultural intelligence to fuse the different cultural perspective. And then fourth is actually the inclusive leadership.
Mhm,
Okay. And that is leading diverse team to success, right? So the fifth is advocacy and impact. So
mhm,
how do you make a difference through cultural intelligence and the power behind it?
mhm,
And then step number six is mastery and growth, where how could you sustain cultural intelligence over time? Of course, you can continue to develop the growth mindset comes
mhm,
with it also the self development goals and other resources because like I said it's always a continuous developing, right?
mhm.
And finally the seventh step is the reflection and refinement. So
Yeah.
how do you do continuous learning journey for this? And I think that's a very good way to assess how can you continue where were you before
Mhm,
the personal mastery, and then where are you now after gaining cultural intelligence and practicing it in real life
yeah.
in at work with your personal relationships as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the refinement is also the measuring. So taking stock of where am I and what progress have I made
Hmm.
is really important here. One question that just popped into my mind, and I know we didn't discuss this earlier, but how do you avoid that you lose yourself?
Yeah, that's a very good
Because
question.
you're
Yeah.
you're sort of, I don't know how to call this exactly, but you're sort of simulating yourself to another culture. How
Hmm.
do you stay yourself while still being culturally intelligent? How do
Yeah.
you balance
Yeah,
those two?
it's a very, very good question because people may think that because I'm now culturally adapting,
Hmm.
I would tend to lose my authenticity. That's
Yeah.
not the goal. The goal
Yeah.
is to be authentic. And to be authentic, you can express yourself, right?
Hmm.
And in expressing that yourself, you can be more successful by having CQ or cultural intelligence
Hmm.
within you so that when you relate towards others, you become more successful.
Yeah.
And that's why actually CQ works in both ways, especially on at teams level,
Yeah.
because it's not the leader who needs CQ, but also the team members, so that when they talk to each other,
Uh-huh.
right? let's say I have a Dutch manager, a leader, and then I have an Indian team member, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very diverse culturally,
Mm-hmm.
from mindset and communication styles, right?
Yeah.
So if both of these team members and team leader would be culturally intelligent, they can still express themselves. Let's say Indians, they shake their head, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
no,
the
yes, 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 right. As an example,
yeah.
without losing themselves to shaking their heads, the leader will now know that this is how the Indians express themselves
Yeah.
when they say yes, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's still being authentic, but having that cultural intelligence, in order to understand how the other person is behaving, is actually culturally acknowledged, in their country. And
Yeah.
now, how can I adopt that so that we can both have resolve communication? Because at the end of the day, most of the problems that we have, especially working at team levels,
Yeah.
is on starts from the communication. And
Yeah.
communication is not just verbal. Actually, science says that communication is only verbal is only 20%, and 80% is body language.
Yeah.
How I move, how I touch you,
Yeah.
how I express, my facial
Mm-hmm.
expression,
Yeah.
how I look down, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, for example, for at the Muslim culture, right?
Yeah.
Women are not um, allowed to look at the eyes,
No,
especially if
you,
you're
you,
talking
you
to a
hardly
man.
ever have eye contact,
Yeah, yeah, especially more
unless, of
so with a
course.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So without that understanding, then you would say, "Oh my God, this person doesn't look at me in the eye, and she's talking, and yeah, she's not respecting me and not focusing on me and not understanding me, etc." Right?
Yeah.
But if you had that background, then you would now understand. And then from the cultural intelligence workshop, team trainings, then you are both now able to meet. From that perspective, how can we best adopt our communication styles?
Yeah.
Because there might be some cultural behaviors, practices that may be useful for the setup in your company.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there are those that may not probably useful, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a teamwork. And like I said, there's nothing right or wrong. Yeah, we
Yeah.
observe all cultural backgrounds of people. It's
It's
just the
it's a spectrum, I
understanding.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering, many teams now work hybrid or fully
Mm.
remote. Does that require extra skills at both ends?
Yeah, you brought a very timely topic,
Yeah.
because since the pandemic, the work from home and hybrid work from home and office has been the norm, right?
Yeah.
Back in the days, I think you and I were still on those traditional working Monday to Friday
Yeah.
in the office, meeting face to face,
Yep.
and having real coffee with the real people.
Uh-huh.
But I would say now it has shifted, right, because of the pandemic, since pandemic situation.
Hmm.
And I would say all the more the global companies, even the startups, right, even more so with the startups actually, when they open their companies, or when they expand to global reach, obviously you can imagine that they will be hiring global talents,
Yeah.
right? And especially if you say work from home or hybrid is acknowledged, then it doesn't matter where these people are located.
Yeah.
For as long as they have a fast internet, they can see you, they can receive information. That's all
Hmm.
that matters, right?
Yeah.
And all the more CQ is relevant and more crucial, because without me understanding what's the behavior or cultural aspect on the other side and
Yeah.
vice versa, when we communicate, especially on Zoom, right, or
Yeah.
MS Teams, Microsoft Teams, for as an example,
Yeah.
all the more it limits the effectiveness of the communication. So without the being CQ aware, right, or
Yeah.
without having the knowledge of CQ, it
Mm-hmm.
makes it more difficult to communicate and be more productive, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to my success. Actually, if I look back now, I just had a thought. um, when I was working in globally for InBev, in Paris, in London, and in Philips, right? Most of our teams were actually predominantly are based offshore,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the whole essence of the cost effectiveness,
Yeah.
transitioning work from on-site to remote, like India, Philippines. You also have like Morocco for French speaking, right? If you're
Yeah.
moving jobs away from Paris to Morocco.
Yeah.
And this has been my experience, that we work globally with people outside and we don't see them face to face. And back in the 90s and
Yeah.
2000, there were no Zoom.
No.
If you recall, there was only a bridge, you dial a number,
Yeah.
right? And then you pin the passcode,
Yeah.
right? And then you start speaking, and
Yeah.
everyone is on the speakerphone,
Yeah.
right? And then sometimes you have difficulties of understanding because one is saying something and the other one saying something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in some cases, some people are having background noise, right? If they don't go on mute.
Uh-huh.
And therefore, the communication is only limited by voice,
Yeah.
vocal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it even more difficult because, like I said, science have proven that effective communication, only 20% is actually conveyed through a vocal, and 80% is more on the body language,
Yeah.
right? So now with the Zoom, thankfully with the Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and other platforms that have evolved since pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
we are now able to see at least each other, and
Yeah.
I could see your reaction, your hand gestures, and that makes it more even effective to communicate now. So the tool is there, the
Mm-hmm.
the softwares are there, but are you ready? From being intelligent enough to understand, okay, when I see this,
Yeah.
this means that, and
Yeah.
and I should not take that differently. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To put it into perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to shift a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because working with people at some point there's going to be some form of conflict. How do you
Mm-hmm.
do that in an international and maybe also in a virtual context?
Mm.
Any tips for that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, this is where CQ plays a very successful role, especially in dealing conflicts, because CQ helps you to resolve conflicts through negotiations, right?
Yeah.
Because no one is better than the other, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's only by negotiating where you can both meet, in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and have a common ground in order to move forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And CQ has been helpful for people who really understands how the other person or the other company or the other party is
Yeah.
receiving it.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say if we move to Middle East companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We go to the likes of Dubai or Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
They would have a different way of negotiating,
Yeah.
and where versus a warm country, right? A typical example would be in warmer countries like Philippines or South America, for example, like Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
where personal relationships is more honored than professional. So in
Yeah.
this case, for example, if we talked about a contract, we have a gentleman's agreement. And to be honest, contract is really not required. It's
No,
just
it's
a
much more.
formality.
Yeah, it's a
Exactly. Yeah.
formal part of it, but the agreement is already there between people.
exactly, because we work on the basis of trust,
Yeah.
right? Whereas in other cultures, right, it's more the professional. Well, first you have to sign my contract
Yeah.
before we can start anything, you
Yeah.
know, and that plays a big understanding of if you don't know this aspect, how do you play the role of the negotiations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some other countries, um, it's their belief that if you speak more, speak more, speak more, speak more, speak more,
Mm-hmm.
you are perceived to be more intelligent. And I don't want to name countries here
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to be racist, but there are countries that I've observed where their belief in speaking more is actually better,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't really give
Add.
any impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas actually speaking less and listening more, right, will give you more, a better understanding and can therefore move forward,
Yeah.
right? So it's really that understanding of how these cultural differences uh, interplay in terms of having a success in negotiation, having a success in project team delivery, and having a success in global leadership,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
So it's yeah, being culturally aware and having the intelligence not only in knowledge but also in that you have the power to apply that knowledge really
Hmm.
helps to um, yeah, effectively deal with conflicts and
Yeah.
also deal with negotiations in the end because
Yeah.
uh, there's always a sort of conflict of interest between the two parties.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think no one is right or wrong, to be honest. It's just the perception of each other's party, right?
Yeah. So would you recommend, let's say, I'm a startup founder,
Hmm.
and yeah, I want to build, of course, the next Mars rover or the next impactful thing. Do you think that it's important for startup founders to be cultural in cultural?
Thanks for that question.
Uh,
It's actually a great question to have. And I must say that in order for a tech startup leader to be successful,
mm,
they need first to have cultural intelligence as an asset in
yeah,
their, or a tool in their how do you say
tools
that,
in their
tool
toolbox.
set, yeah,
Yeah.
toolbox, yeah. And with the personal mastery, what we do there is we go deep into your understanding of your cultural biases. And because we have a framework, the CQ
Mm,
framework, where we do the CQ assessment profile,
mm,
then you have an understanding of your own biases, okay, as a leader. And then when we go and develop a 360 feedback where
mm,
your direct reportees, or it depends how many people you want
yeah.
to do this, and it's anonymous, of course, then you can better see, okay, how people perceive you versus how you perceive yourself. And
Yeah.
then from there, we can help to strategize and build an action plan in order to have a good team leadership, right? And
Mhm.
when we speak about tech startup, right, technology, right,
Mhm.
I can imagine that most of the team members you would be hiring as a tech startup leader is
Mhm.
they will be spread wide across the world, right? Because
Yeah.
I think it's a norm now, right?
Mm.
Everyone is not working on the same office, same location to be successful, because to be global, you
Yeah.
have to be also be willing to expand your borders, right? So when you take this venture into tech leadership, founding a company,
Mhm.
um, CQ will make you even more successful from the beginning,
Yeah.
because now you're able to understand culturally where are your team members come from,
Yeah.
right? From communication style, from decision making style, and all the behaviors that will manifest.
Yeah.
And that will really let's say, minimize, right, the inefficiencies. I wouldn't say completely resolve, because there
No.
are other key areas from a leadership standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So it will minimize the inefficiencies and make your tech startup company be more success from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Also because let's face it, diverse teams are just more innovative.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
but
you made a point.
if you can actually harness that, I would think then it's by being culturally intelligent, by understanding where your own journey started, how people perceive you. Especially that's something I really support. Those
Hmm.
360. Asking people around you is, I think, a really, really powerful thing to. Asking people around you for feedback is a really powerful way to learn about yourself, because there's lots of things that over time but especially if you're young, if you ask that question and if you don't take the input personally,
Hmm.
just take it as, okay, this is how people perceive me, and that's not necessarily right or wrong, it's just as they do. It can be really powerful also to build your own character, to build your own to understand your own strong points, and maybe
Hmm.
also sometimes hire people or get people inside the company that can help you mask, let's say, the less good parts about you.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke about a very good topic, which is also the diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
Uh-huh.
Actually, when I learned the CQ framework, um, actually, the diversity and inclusion may even not work for your company. Because
Mm.
can you imagine 10, 20 different nationalities trying to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
But they are not able to communicate. So, in fact, DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion, if you're not able to really put it into practice, if
Yeah.
it's only a policy for the sake of complying, right?
Yeah.
If you're not able to put it in practice, it can even work against you, against the company, for that matter.
Yeah.
Because just imagine 20 people or 30, 50 people of different nationalities trying to achieve a decision, trying to achieve a strategy, and not
Yeah.
able to communicate. Then that's even going to make it even worse in terms of getting more delays in
Yeah.
strategy, decision making, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you get a sort of UN construction
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
where it takes like forever to reach resolutions.
Yeah, I think you just gave me an idea that to make the UN my client
Yeah.
for
Well,
CQ
they
workshop and assessment.
um, yeah, and but also I think in the UN there's also sort of it's I don't think that the people working at the UN don't have cultural intelligence. I think it's more the people at home that they represent
Mm-hmm.
don't have or do not have the same level of cultural
Mm.
intelligence.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the people at home are paying the people in New York or Geneva to
Mm-hmm.
do the work. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
So there's still a lot to work on. So we talked about your 7-step framework. Last thing I want to discuss or ask about this is how. Okay, so you move through that framework. How do you
Mm-hmm.
set meaningful goals to track your process in your cultural intelligence journey?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very important topic, and thank you for that. I think everyone, especially with your audience, they may be familiar with the SMART
Mm, yeah,
setting of goals. So,
yeah,
being the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, or relevant. I
yeah,
also add that one, yeah, and time bound, right?
yeah.
So, it's very important because while you continue to learn, right, acquire knowledge, right?
Hmm.
Then that gives you in a position to put a strategy and put that in action. Like I said, knowledge is only a potential power. if you don't really put it in action.
Yeah.
And this is where the SMART goals will come in, because as a company, as a leader, right, when you set those goals in place, and you want to drive change in the company, drive change in efficiencies, more productivity, more profit, more team collaboration, higher retention of people, right?
Hmm.
Higher retention of talent,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a big cost for the companies as employees leave the position, right?
Yeah.
Then
Absolutely.
it's really important to measure. Okay, where do we want to take this further? How do
Yeah.
we um, uh, resolve and improve the ways of communication, the ways of delivering as a
Yeah.
team, right? At the end of the day, it's all about the team. It's not just one person
Hmm.
to make it work.
For sure. For sure. Need to be smart,
Hmm.
specific, measurable, attainable, really, yeah, relevant. Especially relevant, I think, is
Yeah,
and time bound.
yeah.
So
Maybe I just want to add there,
yeah.
for my personal SMART goals
Yeah.
for being culturally intelligent
Yeah.
in the Netherlands. I am now trying to improve my Dutch, right?
Okay.
And I have I go every Thursday in bibliotheek, taalcafé um, to practice my Dutch.
Yeah.
It's not because Dutch people don't speak English. English. I
Yeah.
think everyone in the Netherlands speak very good English.
Yeah.
But I think when I'm able to express myself, also being in the Netherlands in Dutch, it gives a level of how do you say it, like a clink immediately
Yeah.
with
It makes it
people.
more easy to communicate, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
And this is my experience with French people.
Mm,
My French is like really terrible. But if I start talking English to them,
yeah.
it's sort of they understand that you're not from there, but they still sort of feel a bit offended.
Mm,
Whereas even
mm-hmm.
if you try with really bad French to make yourself understood,
Mm,
they really take it. They're like, okay, at least he's trying. Okay, let's help
yeah,
him.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
they'll bridge to English, and then it makes, but then it's their choice. And I think it works this sort of similar in the Netherlands.
Mm,
Although I don't know what your experience has been, but my experience that in some of the larger cities like Amsterdam and The Hague,
mm-hmm.
sometimes you're even approached in English.
Mm,
They don't talk Dutch anymore. They just go straight to English. I
yeah.
don't know if you have the same experience.
Yeah, I do. To be honest, when I try my Dutch, they could hear,
Yeah.
that I'm trying. Unfortunately, they immediately switch to English,
Yeah.
en then I would say, mag ik in het Nederlands spreek met jou voor oefenen, and
Yeah.
then they will speak in Dutch in this case. But I would also say a little bit slower, of course, so I
Hmm.
can really understand every word, right?
Yeah.
But I think the Netherlands, because they have also one of the things I like about the Dutch culture is the openness, openness to welcoming other people, other
Hmm.
culture from
Yeah.
different cultural background in the country,
Hmm.
and that is liberating. And I've never felt any racism here
Hmm.
in this country, at least in my personal
Hmm.
experience, whether you are brown or a white or black hair, short and very short
Yeah.
for a nation, right? Compared
Mm.
to Dutch, who are very very tall.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think the fact that they are the Dutch people, I think here culturally we're so welcoming to skilled migrants, to other cultural backgrounds.
Mm.
And that's a reason that perhaps they automatically switch to English,
Hmm.
so that they can make sure that they can communicate with the person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We're one of the upsides from being Dutch is that because we know we're small,
Mm,
And we know that the spread of the language is like really limited.
mm,
We're taught English from
mm,
well, really early age, so everyone has sort of a basic level of English. Although they're trying to promote Dutch now as a language, where I'm like, yeah, yeah, I understand why, but it's a national thing, not necessarily helpful. Anyways, um, on the back of the goal setting, then you also have to measure them and refine them. So how do
mhm,
you find those points? So you've set a goal, in your case, to learn Dutch. How do
mhm, mhm.
you refine that further?
Yes, a very good question. One of my expertise, if I may just add in
Mm,
this discussion, is the Agile framework.
yeah,
Agile means you're able to quickly adopt,
yeah,
okay, and change parameters, variables, or
yeah,
tasks or events
yeah,
as you move along,
yeah.
and that gives you freedom because in the
Mm-hmm.
past the sort of leadership is just pegged on whatever specific task we have planned, right?
Yeah.
And then you go through evaluation after 6 months or 1 year, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
this was the traditional project management waterfall that
Yeah.
I started my career. You have a really predefined project plan, which can go from 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
in the end, you only do the testing before you go live. And then and then you find yourself in a very last moment. You're
Uh-huh.
having all these issues, complaints of users because what you actually developed is not according to their requirements, right?
No.
So thankfully, a new framework came into place
Mm-hmm.
early 2000, which is called Agile Framework. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
an Agile Framework, it's more forgiving, meaning to say you only plan based on every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on
Mm-hmm.
your company,
Yeah.
and we call that sprint. Okay,
Yeah.
and within the sprint, you have the entire sprint plan, right?
Yeah.
For the project, right? And in that every sprint within 2 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on what you choose as a company, right? Every day you have daily feedback where you actually not just involve your technical team, which was the traditional waterfall, you're only talking to technical, technical, technical,
Yeah.
but we're actually forgetting the product owners or the users that represent the functionalities that
Yeah.
we are building for the product, who's
Yeah.
going to sell and use this, right?
Yeah.
So within that sprint, we call that Scrum team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that involves your technical developer, testers,
Mm-hmm.
and your product owners, right? And in that product owner, you give feedback according to the daily activities that has been done. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, I'm using this as a reference for the feedback on the SMART goal, right?
Yeah.
Because if you see that within that sprint, whether on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or 2 weeks basis, it's not working,
Mm-hmm.
then you can be agile in decision making to say, hey, let's step back. Why is this not working? Is this the right goal, the right focus?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the right one. What can we now put
Do.
together?
Yeah.
Right?
Or how can we shift to something that's more effective?
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where I would put the SMART goals planning, okay,
Mm-hmm.
from a feedback reflection and put a framework, which is called agile, right, into team so that you not only involve the people that are immediately within you, but
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, the people that you are actually serving or developing the product for, right? So
Yeah.
that the quicker the feedback, the quicker the time to market, basically, right?
Yeah.
And you don't need to complete everything before you actually show it to the user, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a traditional waterfall methodology that
Yeah.
we
You,
had.
you you build something all the way to the end, and then you ship it out, and then all of a sudden, oh, it doesn't
Exactly,
sort of meet
exactly.
customer expectations because you didn't investigate the problem properly, you didn't have the right requirements, or
Mm-hmm.
you didn't simply along the way you didn't respond to issues that came up.
Yeah, and I would relate it back to your tech startup, right?
Yeah.
Because for the listeners, right? Because if you are not able to communicate because of the cultural lack of cultural intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're not able to factor in the agile leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you may find yourself really the change will be a lot challenging and slower
Yeah.
pace, right? But if you're a tech startup, if you look at all the companies now that are, especially in AI, because
Yeah.
there's a lot, I think 100,000 now of
Uh,
AI startup, right?
yeah.
The quicker you get feedback to your clients,
Yeah.
right? The quicker you can improve your, well, first time to market your product, you
Mm-hmm.
can improve your product, right,
Mm-hmm.
to be more competitive. And then you can build that momentum as you focus on this particular aspect. And then as you progress and make that perfect or usable, right,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to building more features to enrich your product.
Yeah.
And because of that, cultural intelligence makes it your team collaborate for effectively, collaborate more, right, and therefore can deliver more.
Yeah.
It can't deliver more if you don't have internal team collaboration,
Yeah.
right, through communication. And then you can't deliver more if you don't make use of the feedback that your users are giving you.
Yeah. So it enables you to listen better
Yeah.
and to act on it better and to produce more quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's mostly one of the, sadly, why startup companies, they end up, out of business in a
Uh-huh.
couple of months or years because they fail to listen to the
Yeah.
users, right?
Yeah.
There's one software that I won't name names
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of the company, right? It's an alternative to Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very powerful because it has everything in it, AI, dashboard, like
Yeah.
it's like six softwares bundled into one
Yeah.
instead of having multiple softwares.
Yeah.
And people love it. I mean, functionality, etc. It's serving everything and it saves you money as well.
Yeah.
Now, because of the success of the company, they thought they would produce another AI tool,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they focused their development on this new tool, and they forgot that they are still missing some functionalities that they promised to deliver on
On
the
the old
first
tool.
software.
Yeah.
Yeah, and neglected this one, right? And didn't care to bother to get feedback from the community, the users.
Mm-hmm.
Now this company is finding itself in a bankruptcy,
Oh.
right?
Yeah.
So and we love the tool. The users highly support it, but I think the wrong focus went in
Yeah.
because they wanted to create a new AI, but they forgot that they still have to focus and deliver in
On.
enriching this one
Yeah.
based on community feedback, which
Yeah.
unfortunately they missed out. Yeah,
Yeah. That's a really sad story.
yeah,
Okay, Ma Cherie, I want to move towards the end. Thank you for
yes, please,
all
yeah.
the wisdom that you shared with us. So the goal of this podcast is to be obsolete in by the end of 2032,
Mm,
which basically means that by that time, diversity in tech, diversity and inclusion in tech is yeah the new normal.
hmm.
And my question to you is, what would be your expert advice to achieve this?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want your podcast to be obsolete, right? But rather, perhaps we can look into it like how to evolve it into another sort of platform.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge potential, especially AI coming into the picture. I
Yeah.
think all these platforms will really continuously to evolve, if
Mm.
not for the better, right? With the aid of AI,
Yeah.
and AI can help us be more efficient as human beings because we
Yeah.
can do more. Right,
Mhm.
on the basis of automation, right? Especially if you're doing things doing the same things all over again from a procedural perspective, step
Yeah.
1 to 10, then it can clearly automate. From a diversity, equity, and inclusion part, I think for this platform, it
Mm.
can evolve from a DEI perspective for tech startup companies, especially with AI evolving, because it's another intelligence to really understand, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think it's a matter of making sure that the diversity, equity, inclusion is not just brought. It's not just bringing awareness from your platform
Yeah.
perspective, but more so from the implementation aspect of
Yeah.
it, and not just remain as a policy. Because I see a lot of companies, they are saying, okay, now we have checked the box,
Yeah.
DEI compliant and everything, but in the real practice, they're not doing it. And like I said, DEI may even work against you if you don't really
Yeah.
know how to harness it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the only way to harness it is if you are enriching your intelligence, and in this way, culturally intelligent enough. And the only way you can do that is actually by hiring people, coaches, mentors, experts in this matter that can do training, workshops, assessments for your teams, right? And then from there, see from a high, top level perspective
Mm.
what needs to be done to make sure that your team is able to deliver more and work collaboratively and be positive to on each other. Yeah.
Sounds like a great place to wrap. Thank you, Ma Cherie, for the really insightful conversation. If people would like to learn more about you and your book, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And thank you for this great interview. I really enjoyed it. And I hope your listeners have also equally learned and enjoyed this podcast. I would like to invite you and your listeners to check
Yeah.
out my website,
Yeah.
which is macheriecortez.com.
Okay.
And in macheriecortez.com/free gift, you can actually download a copy of my book, 10x Expat Success, for free.
Ah.
And as a promotion to your listeners, who I think the first 5 or 10 that
Yeah.
will listen to this and send you an email that they have listened, and maybe we ask them what's one key factor that they learn from this podcast interview, right?
Yeah.
And how will now adopt that in their environment, right? So second part is what they learned. That's
Yeah.
the knowledge they picked
And
up on
how
this
they
interview
implement it.
and how they implement it. And I would also be curious to hear what improvement they can see on this interview between the two of us, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a person who likes to get feedback
Mm-hmm.
because that's where how we evolve. So for those 5 or 10 users
Yeah.
that
Let's
will
do the first five.
first 5, okay, who will listen and send you an email, I will be giving a special coupon, okay, for
Mm.
them to download a free copy of the Master of Cultural Intelligence in 7 Steps, because it's not free on the website. You have
No.
to pay for 499 euros.
Mm.
And I'm happy to share this coupon, but the value is 1,000 euros, more than 1,000 euros, of course,
Mm-hmm.
because that includes knowledge and also some assessment questionnaire that I
Yeah.
included in the book, right? So you can start having that foundation, and then from there progress your CQ knowledge and profiling, right?
Yeah. And also
So yeah,
implement it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm happy to share that, and I look forward to their support by giving us feedback in terms of the 3 questions, what I
Mm.
have learned from this, how they will use this in their this learning in their work, personal,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
relationships, and then the third, any feedback from them, what they find working and what they find that we can both improve on. That would be great. And My handle, Ma Cherie Cortez, is actually the same in all social media. So, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and then in YouTube, which I'm going to just start the channel
Mm.
where I'll be producing more videos, of course. It's called Expat Rockstar. And that is my, let's say, the venue for continuous improvement of giving to the community more knowledge and sharing of experiences. And hopefully, I will be able to host my own podcast. And you're an inspiration to me, Dirk, Jan, for this podcast setup that you set up. So, and I'm learning from you in this case. So, thank
Okay.
you for having me.
And thank you for being my guest, Ma Cherie. Really appreciate it. To the listeners, if you want to be one of the first five, send me an email, dirkjan at womendisruptingtech.blog. And of course, you can find all the links to the book, to Ma Cherie's social profiles in the show notes and in the YouTube caption. So, with that, I want to thank you very much for watching and listening. I wish you a wonderful day, and until the next episode, keep being awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Women Disrupting Tech about the 7 steps to cultural intelligence mastery with Dr. Ma Cherie Cortez. Special thanks to Chantal Verhoeven for linking us, and Ma Cherie and I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation as much as we did. Ma Cherie was also kind enough to offer a free version of her book Master Cultural Intelligence to the first 5 listeners who sent me an email at dirkjan at womendisruptingtech.blog. So you know what to do if you want her book. If you want to learn more about Dr. Ma Cherie Cortez and her books, feel free to connect with her via the links in the show notes. As usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog. On the same website, you can also become a member of the Women Disrupting Tech community. Members get early access to new episodes, and in the weekly newsletter, I'll share with you what I learned from each of the episodes. Plus, you'll be the first to hear when new blog posts about women who built the internet come online. So check out the show notes for a link. When you're looking for a role model to inspire your own hero's journey in tech, I invite you to check out one of the other episodes of this podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And if you're a regular listener, please give the show a rating or a review because that way you help other people discover the podcast. If you're a male ally and you want to help the Women Disrupting Tech make this podcast obsolete by the end of 2032, there's a simple thing you can do. Please share the podcast with friends, family, and coworkers because this way you give my guest a platform they need to make it happen. Finally, if you want to connect with me, you can reach me via dirkjan at womendisruptingtech.blog or you can send me a DM on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, simply type in my name and you'll find me. With that, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope to see you in the next episode, and until then, keep being awesome.